Dr. Katie Blake was having a normal Tuesday morning on Research Station New Harmony, sipping her coffee while watching the quantum scanners dance with colorful readings. The station floated peacefully at the edge of known space, where humans worked alongside some of the galaxy's most advanced alien species. Katie loved her job here. The crystalline Vorthok were brilliant scientists who could calculate hyperspace equations in their heads, and the luminoids were pure energy beings who could see things humans never could. Then everything went wrong. The signal hit like a sledgehammer to the soul. Katie's coffee mug shattered on the floor as every alien on the bridge suddenly screamed in unison, not with their voices, but with their minds. The sound was terrible, like nails on a chalkboard, mixed with the cry of a dying animal. But somehow it echoed inside her skull. Science Officer Veltar, a tall Vorthok, whose crystal body usually glowed with calm blue light, turned bright red and collapsed. His body hit the metal floor with a sound like breaking glass. The 3 luminoid crew members, normally floating gracefully near the ceiling, crashed down like falling stars, their energy forms flickering wildly. Captain Rob Mitchell came running from his ready room, nearly slipping on Katie's spilled coffee. His face went pale as he saw the chaos around them. Alien crew members were everywhere, some unconscious, others writhing on the floor like they were being tortured. The normally quiet bridge now echoed with groans and whimpers in a dozen different alien languages. "Katie, what the hell is happening?" Rob shouted over the noise, stepping carefully around the fallen body of their navigation officer, a slug-like being whose green skin had turned an ugly yellow color. Katie's fingers flew across her control panel, trying to make sense of the readings. Her instruments were going crazy, showing energy patterns she had never seen before. "It's some kind of signal, Captain, but it's not coming through our communication systems. This is something else entirely." She pulled up the analysis on her main screen. The readings made her stomach turn. "Rob, this is psychic energy. Pure thought, raw emotion, being broadcast across space like a radio signal. And it's not just local. This thing is reaching across multiple star systems." Rob watched as another alien crew member, their chief engineer, started convulsing. The poor creature's tentacles were wrapped around his head like he was trying to keep his brain from exploding. "Why aren't we affected? Why are only the aliens going down?" Katie checked her readings again, her hands shaking. The truth was starting to dawn on her, and it was terrifying. Because we're human, Rob. Our minds work differently. The aliens, they're all telepathic to some degree. They can sense thoughts, emotions, sometimes even communicate without words. But humans, we're like psychic dead zones. Our brains don't pick up on that stuff naturally. She turned to face him, her eyes wide with fear. "Whatever is sending this signal, it's dying. This isn't just a cry for help. This is a death scream so powerful, so full of terror and pain, that it's knocking out every telepathic species within range. And judging by these readings, that range covers half the galaxy." The emergency lights started flashing red as more systems began failing. Without alien crew members to run the advanced equipment, the station was slowly falling apart. Rob grabbed the ship-wide communicator. "All human personnel to the bridge immediately. We've got a situation." As Katie watched her alien friends suffer, she realized something that chilled her to the bone. Whatever was dying out there in the dark, whatever was screaming with such incredible fear and pain, it was something that had scared one of the most powerful minds in the galaxy, and now its death cry was paralyzing entire civilizations. The humans were the only ones left standing, the only ones who could hear the scream without being destroyed by it. For the first time in her life, Katie was grateful for humanity's supposedly primitive non-telepathic brains. They might be the galaxy's only hope. Admiral Jack Carter was finishing his morning briefing at Luna Command when the emergency transmission came through. The old soldier had seen plenty of action in his 40 years of service, but nothing had prepared him for what he was hearing. Entire star systems going silent. Alien fleets abandoning their posts and fleeing toward the galaxy's core. Whatever was happening out there, it had the so-called civilized species running like scared rabbits. Jack had always been different from other human commanders. While most of his peers played politics with the fancy Galactic Council, he had spent decades making friends in the dark corners of space. The galaxy was full of species that the Council considered too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable for polite society. They called them Deathworlders, species that had evolved on planets so hostile that just surviving to adulthood was an achievement. The Council treated these species like barbarians, keeping them at arm's length and pretending they didn't exist. But Jack knew better. He had visited their worlds, fought alongside their warriors, and learned their ways. When humanity first joined the galactic community, everyone called Earth a death world too. They said humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to fight impossible odds. Jack smiled at that memory. He had always taken it as a compliment. Lieutenant Beth Collins, he called to his communications officer. Open secure. Channels to our special friends. It's time to call in some favors. Beth looked confused for a moment. She was new to Luna Command and didn't know about Jack's unofficial network. Sir, which friends exactly? The ones the Council pretends don't exist, Jack said, walking over to his personal communication console. Send word to the Krovik hunting fleets. Tell Captain Razorclaw that humanity needs his pack. Contact the Pirathi warforges on their molten worlds. And get me aligned to the Skarn Hive clusters. Tell them all the same thing the galaxy has. A nightmare problem. And we need monsters to fight monsters. Beth's eyes went wide as she realized what Jack was suggesting. The species he was naming were legends. Scary stories that Council diplomats told to keep their children in line. The Krovik were born predators from a world where everything tried to eat everything else. The Pirathi lived on planets with surface temperatures hot enough to melt steel. The Skarn were a hive mind that could coordinate millions of individual fighters like they were parts of one giant organism. Sir, Beth said carefully, are you sure about this? The Council specifically forbids contact with those species. They're considered extremely dangerous. Jack laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Beth, right now the Council's ships are running away from something that has them so scared they're abandoning entire sectors. Their civilized approach isn't working. Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire. Within hours, space around Earth began to fill with ships unlike anything Beth had ever seen. The Krovik dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace like hunting sharks, their hulls covered in scars from battles on their nightmarish homeworld. These weren't pretty ships designed for diplomacy. They were weapons, built by a species that had learned to kill or be killed before they could even walk. The Skarn vessels moved in perfect formation, thousands of small ships acting like fingers of a giant hand. Each ship held only a few crew members, but they all shared one mind, one purpose. Watching them maneuver was like watching a swarm of angry wasps. If wasps were the size of buildings and armed with plasma cannons. Captain Diana Wright, commanding the human destroyer Iron Will, watched the gathering fleet from her bridge. She had never seen so much firepower in one place. Admiral, she transmitted to Jack, the Council monitoring stations are going crazy. They're demanding to know why we're assembling an invasion force. Jack's voice crackled back over the comm system, and Diana could hear the satisfaction in it. Tell the Council that their civilized species are running away from something, and it's time for the uncivilized ones to take a look. The galaxy spent years telling us we were too primitive, too violent, too dangerous for their perfect society. He paused, watching as more Deathworlder ships continued to arrive. Maybe it's time they learned why the universe made species like us in the first place. The massive fleet of Deathworlder ships prepared to jump into hyperspace, following the terrifying psychic signal that had paralyzed half the galaxy. Commander Dave Wilson stood on the bridge of his scout ship Relentless, checking the equipment one last time. His ship had been fitted with special shielding designed to protect human minds from psychic attacks, though nobody really knew if it would work against something this powerful. "All ships, prepare for jump," Admiral Jack Carter's voice echoed across the communication channels. "Remember, we're going in blind. Stay alert and keep your weapons ready." Dave felt his stomach drop as the Relentless entered hyperspace, followed by hundreds of other ships from dozens of different Deathworlds. The journey took 6 hours, following the psychic beacon deeper into unexplored regions of space. During the trip, Dave's navigator, Chief Petty Officer Lisa Hayes, kept monitoring their instruments with growing concern. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with worry, "the psychic readings are getting stronger. Whatever's broadcasting that signal, we're getting close to it." When they finally dropped out of hyperspace, the entire fleet went silent for a long moment. What they saw defied belief and filled even the hardest warriors with dread. "Dear God," Lisa whispered, her face pressed against the viewing screen. What happened here? Before them lay the remains of what had once been a thriving star system, but it looked like someone had taken a giant hammer to it. Planets hung in space, like broken toys, split wide open with their cores missing. Moons had been carved up like pieces of fruit. Even the asteroids looked wrong, with strange geometric patterns cut into their surfaces. "Sir," called out Ensign Mike Torres from his sensor station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system, and those things orbiting the star, they're not natural." Dave looked at the main display and felt his blood run cold. Floating around the dying red star were structures that hurt to look at. They were perfectly geometric, made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in bizarre patterns that made Dave's eyes water if he stared too long. "Those aren't ships," Dave realized, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're machines, and they're old. Really, really old." The communication system crackled to life as Admiral Carter's voice reached the entire fleet. "All ships, maintain distance and scan everything. What we're looking at is the graveyard of an entire civilization. These machines, whatever they are, they did this." As if responding to Carter's words, the ancient constructs began to move. Lights flickered along their surfaces, patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Dave watched in fascination and terror as the massive structures turned toward the Deathworlder fleet, moving with impossible grace for something so large. "Commander," Lisa said, her voice shaking, "the psychic signal is coming from those machines. But it's not just a recording. There's something alive in there, trapped inside those things." Dave opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "All ships, those constructs are waking up. I think our arrival triggered something." From his research of ancient galactic history, Dave knew the stories. Long ago, there had been an empire called the Luminary beings of pure thought and energy, who had ruled vast regions of space. They had been incredibly advanced, more powerful than any species the current galaxy had ever seen, but they had vanished thousands of years ago, leaving behind only myths and legends. Now Dave was starting to understand what had happened to them. These machines, these harvesters, had found the Luminary and done something worse than killing them. They had trapped their minds, feeding on their psychic energy like vampires feeding on blood. "Sir," Mike called out, "the constructs are powering up weapons. Energy readings are off the charts." Dave felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. These ancient machines had been sleeping for millennia, satisfied after consuming the greatest psychic civilization in galactic history. But the Luminary's final death scream had woken them up, and now they sensed new prey. The harvesters had been dormant for thousands of years, waiting for their next meal, and the Deathworlder fleet had just announced dinner was served. "All ships." Admiral Carter's voice boomed across the communication channels. We've found what killed the Luminary Empire. These things have been eating civilizations for God knows how long. Stay sharp, people. We're about to find out why the universe needs monsters like us." The ancient machines began moving toward them, and Dave knew the real fight was about to begin. The ancient machines struck without warning, unleashing beams of pure energy that had destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. These weapons were designed to be perfect, calculated to overwhelm any defense system that logical, organized minds could create. For thousands of years, no species had survived their first assault. But the Deathworlders weren't like other species. Major Rick Powell watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the human assault carrier Vengeance, and what he saw made him grin despite the danger. The harvester weapons, so deadly against civilized fleets, were missing their targets completely. The reason was simple. The Deathworlder ships weren't acting like normal military vessels. "Look at those Kravik ships go," Rick said to his tactical officer, pointing at the main display. The predator species from the nightmare world of Krava were doing something impossible. Their ships were literally disappearing and reappearing, phasing in and out of normal space like hunting phantoms. The harvester targeting computers, designed to predict the movements of logical disciplined fleets, couldn't figure out what the Kravik were doing. These weren't ships following military doctrine. They were a pack of spaceborne hunters following millions of years of predatory instinct. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Janet Cross from her sensor station, "the Kravik aren't following any flight pattern I recognize. They're hunting these machines like prey animals." Rick nodded, understanding what he was seeing. The Kravik had evolved on a world where everything bigger than your thumb wanted to kill you. They had learned to hunt in packs, to strike from unexpected angles, to think like predators instead of soldiers. Their ship movements looked random to the ancient machines, but Rick could see the pattern. They were circling, testing defenses, looking for weak spots, just like wolves hunting a deer. The Skarn were even more confusing to the harvesters. Their insectoid ships moved in massive swarms, thousands of small vessels acting like one giant organism. But unlike normal formations, the Skarn swarm kept changing shape, flowing like liquid around the enemy fire. "Jesus," whispered Chief Engineer Amy Roberts, watching the Skarn in action. "They're not thinking like individual pilots. They're all connected, but their hive mind is completely chaotic. How do you target something that changes its mind 1,000 times per second?" The human ships were adding their own brand of madness to the battle. Captain Tony Blake, commanding the heavy cruiser Defiant, was doing something that would have gotten him court-martialed in any civilized navy. He was flying straight at one of the moon-sized harvester constructs, his engines pushed far beyond safe limits. "Defiant, what are you doing?" Rick transmitted to Tony's ship. Tony's voice came back over the communication system, calm, as if he were ordering coffee. "These things are designed to fight at long range, sir. I bet they don't expect someone stupid enough to get up close and personal." Rick watched in amazement as Tony's cruiser slammed directly into the harvester construct, disappearing inside its geometric shell. Seconds later, a massive explosion lit up the darkness of space as Tony detonated his ship's reactor core inside the enemy machine. "That crazy bastard actually did it," Amy said, watching as the ancient construct began breaking apart. "He just proved these things can be hurt." But the victory celebration was short-lived. The remaining harvesters began changing their tactics, their ancient artificial minds learning from the encounter. They started firing in random patterns, trying to match the chaos of their enemies. "Sir," Janet reported, "the machines are adapting. They're learning to think more like us, more randomly, more aggressively." Rick felt a chill run down his spine. These machines had consumed entire civilizations by being smarter, more organized, more logical than their prey. But now they were trying to become chaotic, trying to think like the Deathworlders. "All ships," Rick transmitted to the fleet, "stay unpredictable. These things are learning our tactics. Don't give them patterns to follow. The battle raged on, with Deathworlder ships dancing through space in ways that defied military logic. The Pyrathi species that evolved in planetary furnaces were ramming their molten metal ships into harvester weapons and coming out the other side still fighting. Their hulls were designed to withstand the heat of their homeworld surface, making them nearly indestructible. But Rick could see the truth in the battle reports. The harvesters were ancient and patient. They had thousands of years of experience consuming civilizations. Each passing minute, they were becoming more unpredictable, more like the very monsters they were fighting. The Deathworlders had surprised them, but surprise only worked once. Now it was going to be a real war, and Rick wasn't sure if even the galaxy's most dangerous species could win against machines that had perfected the art of destruction over millions of years. The battle was just beginning. Back on the research station New Harmony, Dr. Katie Blake was still connected to the psychic network that had started this whole nightmare. While the Deathworlder fleet battled the ancient machines, she could feel the harvesters trying to probe her mind, searching for the fear and terror that had paralyzed every other telepathic species in the galaxy. But they didn't find fear. Instead, they found something that confused their ancient artificial minds, completely pure. Burning human rage, Katie had watched her alien friends collapse in agony. She had seen entire civilizations go silent as the psychic scream tore through their minds. She had witnessed the death of species that had existed for millions of years, all because these machines treated intelligent life like food to be consumed. She was absolutely furious. "Admiral Carter," she transmitted to the fleet, her voice shaking with anger instead of fear. "I'm still connected to their network. I can feel what they're doing, how they think. These things expect us to be afraid, but I'm not afraid anymore. I'm pissed off." Admiral Jack Carter's voice crackled back through the communication system. "Katie, what are you thinking?" "I can reverse the signal," she said, her hands flying over her control panels. "Instead of broadcasting the luminary's death scream, I can send them something else. I can send them what we're really feeling, the fury of every Deathworld species that's tired of being called primitive." Deep in the Harvester network, Katie made contact with something incredible: fragments of luminary consciousness that had survived inside the machines for thousands of years. These ancient beings had been trapped, used as living batteries to power the Harvester's psychic weapons. But they weren't completely gone. "Help me," Katie whispered into the psychic void. "Help me turn their own weapon against them." The surviving luminary minds, filled with thousands of years of imprisoned rage, joined with Katie's human fury. Together, they began to channel something the Harvesters had never encountered before: the collective defiance of species that refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. The psychic scream that had paralyzed civilizations suddenly changed. Instead of terror and despair, it became a roar of challenge that echoed across space. It carried the hunting cry of the Krovik, the unified battle song of the Skarn, the molten determination of the Pyrathi, and above all, the stubborn human refusal to surrender. Commander Helen Rodriguez, watching the battle from her heavy cruiser Thunder, saw the effect immediately. The Harvester constructs began flickering, their perfect geometric forms wavering like mirages in the desert. "What the hell?" her tactical officer shouted. "The enemy ships are shutting down. The ancient machines, designed to process the ordered thoughts of civilized species, couldn't handle the chaotic mix of emotions flooding their systems. Fear, they understood. Logic, they could counter. But this raw, defiant fury from species that treated impossible odds as a personal challenge, their billion-year-old minds simply couldn't process it. One by one, the massive Harvester constructs went dark, their systems overloaded by psychic energy they were never designed to handle. The machines that had consumed entire empires were being destroyed by the very emotions they had dismissed as primitive. "All ships, press the attack," Admiral Carter ordered as the enemy fleet began falling apart. These things are finished. The Deathworlder ships swarmed over the disabled harvesters, their weapons tearing apart constructs that had seemed invincible just minutes before. The Krovik howled with joy as they ripped into their ancient prey. The Skarns sang in harmonious victory. The Pyrathi burned the remains with the heat of their homeworld's core, and the humans, they just kept fighting with the grim satisfaction of people who had been underestimated their entire lives. Captain Bobby Chen, commanding the destroyer, relentless, watched the last harvester construct go silent. "Admiral, that's the last of them. The galaxy's nightmare is over." Admiral Carter stood on his bridge, looking out at the wreckage of machines that had terrorized the universe for millions of years. The so-called primitive species had just accomplished what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could never do. They had fought back against the ultimate predator and won. "Set course for home," Carter ordered, "and send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them the Deathworlders just cleaned up their mess." As the combined fleet turned toward home, Katie Blake smiled for the first time in days. The galaxy had spent years calling humanity and its allies too violent, too chaotic, too dangerous for civilized society. Maybe they were right. But sometimes, the universe needed its monsters to fight even bigger monsters. The reign of the harvesters was over, ended not by superior technology or ancient wisdom, but by the simple refusal of Deathworld species to give up. The galaxy would remember this day, the day the barbarians saved civilization itself. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.